Welcome, everybody. My name is Caitlin. I'm the editor of International Bakery and International Confectionery magazine. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Mike Moran of Brook Food and Bakery Equipment. Mike, could you please introduce yourself for the audience and talk a little bit about your role within the company?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Mike Moran. I am the sales director here at Brook Food and Processing Equipment. I've been with the business for a year and a half. My background has always been working within ingredients, so coming into the equipment sector is kind of opened my eyes to the challenges on the other side of bakery. My role here is I predominantly look after the whole sales function internally and externally, and kind of commercially what we do moving forward with our range.
Fabulous. And I just wanted to pick up on something you just said there. You said, I used to work in ingredients and now I can see the challenges on the other side. Could you briefly summarize, if it's possible to be brief, what the challenges are that are facing bakeries today?
Yeah, I think the one common theme, and this has been for many years now, is but bakeries that have, or the baking industries had to get used to the fact that the way that they source ingredients has been incredibly complex because, well, everything has been a rising market now for well over kind of 10 years. So the challenges involved in that are there's no fixed cost base. So when you go to market for your ingredients, you're always in a cycle whereby you don't truly understand what you're paying for a product from one week to the other. Then moving over into kind of the production and equipment side of things, again, you've got the never-ending cost of raw material that's increasing. However, there's also the challenges involved with further investment in your the equipment you use, and more importantly, understanding what equipment can benefit your production cycle today that maybe you're unaware of. And then the big kind of conversational piece that's been huge now for over a year is the energy saving efficiencies that are involved with some of the equipment you use. And many people don't really understand what the benefit versus what they use today versus kind of upgrading looks like.
That's interesting. Do you think, talking about the fluctuating costs of everything, and I suppose this sense of, oh God, what is it going to cost next week, and not being able to budget for that. Do you think the approach from bakeries has changed? Did it used to be, we don't need to worry about this so much now? Did it used to be, we don't need to worry about this, it'll be fine? Has it become much more of a concern that the costs will fluctuate to the point where they have no control over it?
Yeah, first of all, they've got no control over it now. No one's got control over it. The volatility in the markets don't allow us to have any control. All we can do is make sure that at every point of the supply chain, everybody, should we say, makes it enough to be able to warrant operating. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. Unfortunately, then at some point it comes down to the end user, and whether that's the bakery itself or it's the consumer, someone's got to feel the impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
I go back to when I first got into the baking industry. The mantra then, certainly within kind of ingredient supply through wholesale, it was very much so. You had to, obviously, things don't necessarily change when it comes to relationships, but it was it could be very aggressive on the pricing structure. So wholesalers would kind of have a look at profit, be cash per delivery, route efficiency, and so forth. However, that mentality is not necessarily there now. The price is the price. So when you go to market to source, I mean, you're already paying, and it's not even a premium. You're paying what the market demands for that product. So relationships never been so important.
I wanted to pick up on something you said with regards to energy efficiency, about people not necessarily knowing why they need to be concerned about it, because it feels like within the bakery industry, it's become a really big talking point. So first of all, why do you think it's become such a big talking point? Has it been out of necessity, for instance?
I think it's not there's two parts to it. I think there's the shock factor when you have a look at kind of some of the customers that we've worked specifically with who have really focused on their energy efficiency. There's the shock factor of when that first quarterly bill comes through and you truly see what the difference of running your bakery looks like, and forget kind of everything else from an operating perspective. Absolutely, just on your gas and electric, there was a shock factor. Now, as the baking industry is incredibly resilient, always has been, always will be. It always finds a way to come through. However, there's still an element of the unknown coming. So don't get me wrong, the industry is shrinking. We see many bakeries closing week on week. Now, whilst the number of people operating is shrinking, the consumer demand is still increasing. So somebody benefits at some point along the journey that we're on. And most of it now is to do with production styles, techniques, and being in the right place at the right time to take advantage.
But it's challenging, right? It's challenging to, as you say, operate profitably. It's interesting that, during times of economic uncertainty, it feels like although people are watching what they spend, that's a big talking point. Yeah. They're also wanting to find ways to relax and comfort themselves. So they actually eat more baked goods. As you say, the demand has gone up. How do you think, from your perspective and in your job, how can we ensure bakery production is more energy efficiency? Can you talk about what the focal points for that are?
It's difficult because you can't ensure. It's not about ensure or insuring, because everybody's bakery is unique. It's key. Everyone's got their own feeling. Everyone's got their own way that they want to, or their customers perceive them, consumers perceive them. Whether it's your small town, village type bakery that's the hub of the community, all the way up to kind of a small to medium sized wholesale bakery that's moving into larger scale manufacture. They've all got their own unique and some quirky way of making decisions. So it's not necessarily about ensure or being able to ensure. It's about going in and understanding what they do today and really learning about their business. So everybody is individual. So you can only go in and as individuals recommend and make propositions that will benefit what they do today. Now, whether that is through machinery that is simply as like for like, same capacity, but over the course of time, the way that these things are manufactured is automatically going to save you money over a period of time. So you have a look at return of investment over the period of months and years, rather than living kind of with your feet in the mud today. And the other one is kind of the other side of it is the people aspect, the skill set. It's incredibly hard to find anybody who is skilled, and then counter that, if you find somebody that is willing, it's incredibly hard to find the time to teach them. So having the balance between kind of taking away more of the mundane aspects of bakery and looking at more of a automated approach without removing that feeling handheld is a balance, and that's where it starts with the customer. What does the customer want there to be perceived like? What do they want their products to look like? And then ultimately, what are they willing to do in the background to make it work, that they can save both time and money and ultimately increase what they get at the end of their business day? And they work very hard, so being able to increase your profit by doing something a little bit smarter, it tends to be, it certainly is the majority of what we do.
And I suppose taking into account this is going to sound very duh question or answer, but taking into account the actual infrastructure of the bakery and what kind of size they're working with and their capacity has to be probably one of the first things you look at, right?
Yeah, you have to. If you can't simply and remember, trust comes into this as well. If somebody's on the other end of the line, and they believe they understand what you need to be able to improve either production, process, consistency, then I'm not sure how you can buy into that. Because, well, if you don't get kind of into the hearts and minds of what's going on in that environment, then it's very hard to make a compelling proposition that you can absolutely hand on heart say is going to work. Which is a big part of what, when I joined, was what the initial focus was. It was to bring in products, bring in specialists that can go and have a look at the whites in people's eyes and build trust and understanding that that what we consider being a good option for them will work. Whether it's to save money or save time, it will work.
Because you spoke about investments at the beginning, I believe, and this sounds exactly that. And anything they do in their bakery will be an investment, and they want to make sure it's a worthwhile investment. You touched upon as well skilled labour, which of course is another big talking point, labour shortages within the bakery industry. Could you talk briefly about the main impacts that are felt by bakeries?
Well, it's just incredibly frustrating if you lose a good baker and you need to go and try and find a replacement, or if you make the decision to take the next step in your kind of journey of scaling up your bakery, but what you realize is that you've got four walls, you've got a ceiling, you've got the equipment, but you don't have anybody to operate it. But you also want to run your business, not work for your business, if that makes sense. So it's so difficult, and it has been this is, when I first come into it, it was the two most challenging things in the industry was one, certainly from my perspective, was one, no one can find quality bakers, but then compounding that with that nobody had the time to be able to train anybody on site. So putting that knowledge into somebody is incredibly difficult and time consuming to get them to a standard without affecting anything that you produce that day. But then the other one was drivers. So whether it was drivers for their rounds or drivers for people that were delivering to them, there was a shortage of drivers. They were the two biggest challenges. Everything else was relatively static, energy, ingredients. So that was what you heard about. Now it's everything.
Yeah, I hear that. Why do you think, if it's, I don't know if it's an easy answer as much as it's not an easy solution, why do you think this pool of skilled labour is shrinking?
Well, I think the first one is how do you, and certainly with the kind of and should we say like the stereotypical kind of generational baker that is well known in their region. Everybody locally, consumers know them. But would you want to go and do a shift that starts at 1 a.m. And finishes at 7:30, and then you kind of get to live that life? And unless you absolutely adore what you make, it's very hard when, especially with the next generation, the appetites are different.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
The mindset of today's generation or next generation coming through are one that they predominantly talk about balance, mental health, incentives, which kind of goes away from a lot of what the historical baking industry was about. It was about hard work and long hours, and your reward was what you saw at the end of the day on the shelf.
So you think ultimately the mindsets of the younger bakers have shifted, and working in a bakery has traditionally been a grueling job, but there's less of a willingness?
Yeah, well, you can only take what you see as a good example to make a kind of not an informed decision, but an opinion. Now, there are some more, so we say less traditional. So, not that my dad wasn't a baker, my granddad was a baker, that are bucking the trend, and they are enticing talent. They are bringing people into their bakery. And the training and development exists, but they produce during the day. So there isn't a grueling night shift. They've found ways to manipulate the production process, which means that they don't have to worry about operating a night shift. And they do everything they need to do in the same kind of business hours as any other industry. Now, that's compounding that, the people that I'm thinking about in this circumstance are three particular bakeries. They also run incentive programs for their staff. So there is a buy-in, a bond. And then once kind of these guys are getting trained and they're rewarded, then from what I see, their retention rates are very high. It's very difficult, though, to go from kind of, it's easy to say, a lot harder to achieve, especially when you've been operating for many years and that's what you do. It's like the DNA of your business. So to simply go, I'll tell you what, don't do that anymore. Just produce during the day. It's fine. But it works. It works when you start thinking about rather than thinking about the other way, I can't get skilled people. Okay, well, what is it that people want? And how can I make that work for my business?
That's a really good point. I was going to ask you as well whether you think apprenticeships, for instance, can play a role in training people up. And you mentioned like initiatives that bring people into the company, and there's more of a bond and there's more of a commitment. Do you think, for instance, that might be the way forward, or do you think that this is something that requires multiple approaches?
I think it's multiple approaches. I think absolute grassroots focus is a must. Something that we are doing and continue to do is we are looking to and have been working more and more at grassroots with the colleges and universities and forget it being kind of a marketing stunt, is to have our equipment in areas of education that support the next generation of bakers, patissiers. That's one thing. The other, as I said, you can do the grassroots thing, which focus on the next stage of development. Apprenticeships, absolutely. Apprenticeship. I don't think it's. I can't remember a time where I think apprenticeships have been best suited to support and enticing talent into a business and nurturing them. And then the other one, as I said, then is that you've still then got to remember is that when you're at grassroots level and you're shopping for talent generationally, the work-life balance and the incentive for going to work is something that needs to be focused on. And small things make huge differences. So we're not talking kind of £1,000 worth of incentives. We're talking about small little things that make a huge difference that don't actually have to have a cost involved.
What, if I may ask, what sort of small things?
So in particular, some of the guys that I know kind of do incentivize things around rewarding with holidays, and that's not just holidays, a day off, like weekends away for a team member of the quarter. They do family kind of led things where they bring their families in and they hold family days at the bakery kind of once every 6 months. There is like kind of businesses that operate kind of financial incentives for people that that are good, that come to work at the same time every day, turn up every day. So there is a reward for. This sounds like kind of unbelievable to say it, but a reward for just being there. And then there are kind of product champion awards. I know one bakery that they are so keen to reward people that focus on certain areas of what they produce, that they reward them for consistency, which builds the mindset of that person that they absolutely focus on consistency, the quality of what they do. Because without that incentive there, then, and the mindset difference generationally, a lot of people won't care about that level of consistency unless there is a carrot being dangled. So when you have a look at kind of a salary package, it's worth looking at it, not just from what you get annually, but what's built into that can allow you to go on and take or gain a little bit more for the same time that you would be working.
It does sound surprising, but it sounds like the industry has reached a point where it's like we've either got to adapt and got to find ourselves a more attractive option, or I don't know, maybe these problems will be exacerbated further down the line if you physically do not have the people.
Certainly, I wouldn't have said this 15 years ago, but I will now. In 15 years' time, yeah, it will, because it's already getting worse every year. And you look at what some of the colleges are doing with their people. Well, they go through all of this skill set, they come out and they don't enter the industry. So
why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it is that it's the route to market. It's how do you link the industry with the educational system? Because they don't truly feel like there's a link. So therefore, when you come out and you've gone through 2 or 3 years of training, how then do you find your feet in the industry? And I see on formats like LinkedIn frequently people in college and university environments that are shouting out to a wider audience, can anybody help me get in my foot in the door? So wouldn't it be nice if it was the other way around, and the industry, or whether it's the industry and industry bodies, which I know the industry bodies do work with the colleges, but it all kind of, there was more focus on how you take the tomorrow's kind of talent. I was going to sound like a pun now. Today, there are people coming out of these educational systems that don't understand how to get into work. Now that's 2 ways, because the educational system also has got to focus on that.
Yeah, because when we speak about apprenticeships, it feels like there's been a real push from the government, not just in bakery, but in lots of jobs that require hands-on skilled labour. It feels like there's been a real push. But I wanted to ask you as well, when you were talking about we work with universities, we work with colleges, do you think in today's younger generation, people who are going through school now, do you think they're aware that this is an option? Do you think it's being advertised well enough?
The answer is I don't know. I don't know for sure. I'm sure there are some areas that do or have better kind of setups than others. My opinion would be that I think if we go back to kind of when I was at school, and I was so informed on what I could do leaving school, and I had so many options and apprenticeship schemes, and I'm not sure how that exists today. I'm not even sure if the same amount of time is spent when you're at school leaving age as to what your options are. I mean, the same level as we did when I was leaving school.
Yeah, I wonder as well, because I do wonder whether there's this assumption that people will go into higher education, which is absolutely fine. That's one avenue, but whether there's enough of a push and who should be making a push. I mean, there are lots of questions, right? And as you say, it requires multiple approaches, and there's not just one quick solution to this. There is or I wanted to get your opinion on this, talk about, well, we can just replace people with automated machines if we have to. Do you think that is a sustainable solution, considering the bakery industry feels like it's all about relationships and going out to your customers and talking to your customers about the best options and gaining that trust. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike,
Sorry.
for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you.
That was really enlightening, and I'm sure a lot of what you said is going to ring true with our audience. If anyone would like to reach out to Mike for any further questions, please do.
Thank you.